This lecture will introduce you to the Roman Empire from the end of the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. This is the time when the Roman Empire was at its most powerful, and before it begins to face problems during the 3rd century. This lecture will also give you a brief introduction to Roman architecture from this period, especially through examples from Pompeii. Historians consider Augustus to be the first emperor, although he did not call himself that. He did not want to make the same mistake as Julius Caesar by declaring himself to be a dictator. The Senate still existed, and it was important for administration, as well as to legitimize the actions of Augustus. And Augustus was careful to maintain a good relationship with the Senate, and at least to pretend that the senators still had some decision-making capacity. After he defeated Marcus Antonius at the end of the civil wars, his power was not very secure, and at least at the beginning he had to work hard to create a role for himself. He ended up ruling until his death in 14 AD, when he was 76 years old. Part of his success was due to his clever use of messaging and propaganda, both concerning himself and his family, but also shaping an image and identity for the Romans as a whole. For example, the Aeneid by Virgil was written during the time of Augustus. This epic repeatedly sends a not very subtle message, that it is the destiny for the Romans to be a powerful people ruling a limitless territory with the direct help of the gods. Augustus also wanted to improve the city of Rome so that it was a more fitting demonstration of the strength of the Romans. Augustus boasted that he transformed Rome from a city of clay to one of marble. To give an example, he commissioned a temple to Mars, Venus, and Julius Caesar within the new forum called the Forum Augustus. The temple was the largest temple at the time and employed imported marble of different colors. Marble is an expensive building material and also takes a lot of skill to carve. In other words, both the size and materials of this building helped to express the power and wealth of Augustus and also of the Romans in general. You may notice that Julius Caesar was one of the gods worshipped in this temple. After his death, Julius Caesar was deified by the Senate. This means that the Senate declared that Julius Caesar had become a god. Augustus was also deified after his death, and it became common for emperors and even sometimes their wives to be deified and then be worshipped in temples. This is called imperial cult. Temples or small shrines for emperor worship became especially common in the eastern part of the empire, and many were built in Turkey, including a temple to Trajan at Pergamon, shown on the left, and a temple to Hadrian at Ephesus, shown on the right. Some scholars wonder whether people really believed that the emperors could become a god, or rather if these imperial cult temples were just a way to express the presence and strength of the empire, especially in territories located far from Rome. Building these temples was also a way for the elites of a city such as Ephesus to express their loyalty and connections within the empire. Even if we may be skeptical of the motivations behind these temples, the large number of these buildings do indicate that it was a common practice, and also that the emperors were perceived as protecting the empire and its citizens even after their death. When Augustus died, his stepson Tiberius became the emperor. Tiberius was part of the Julio-Claudian dynasty of emperors, and you can see the others pictured here. They are all related in some way to the family of Augustus and Julius Caesar. Ancient Roman writers are very negative when describing the Julio-Claudian emperors. They describe Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero as insane, sadistic men who loved killing people and spending lavish amounts of money on parties and building villas and palaces. It's difficult to know how much of these stories we should believe. Claudius is the only one who is described as a good emperor, and is praised for his public building projects such as new aqueducts, roads, and a port near Rome. Nero, on the other hand, was harshly criticized for his construction of an elaborate and expensive palace called the Golden House, which supposedly had walls covered in gold leaf. The death of Nero was followed by a short civil war which was won by a general named Vespasian. His two sons, Titus and Domitian, ruled after him, and together they formed the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian had a very successful military career and was a popular emperor. One of his actions that increased his popularity was dismantling Nero's golden house and building the Colosseum in its place. The Colosseum is an amphitheater that was used for various performances, including gladiators, stage battles, and displays of exotic wild animals and animal hunts. Sponsorship of such entertainment was one device that Roman leaders and elites used to increase their popularity. We use an expression, bread and circuses, to refer to the two main methods that Roman leaders used to keep the masses of poor people in Rome content and to avoid rioting. The circuses refer to the various forms of free or cheap entertainment. The bread refers to the allotment of free bread to poor people in Rome. Even today, governments often have price controls to artificially keep the price of bread and wheat low, and have programs to distribute free or low-cost bread. We can see both of these in modern Turkey. The Colosseum is also an excellent example of Roman innovations in architecture and engineering. The Greeks, for example, would not have been able to build such a large freestanding amphitheater because it requires the use of concrete. The Romans pioneered the use of concrete in construction, and much of this building is made of concrete, but with stone blocks used to form the exterior surface. During the time of the Emperor Titus, the volcano Mount Vesuvius erupted in the south of Italy, near modern Naples. It caused two cities, Pompeii and Herculaneum, to be buried in ash, preserving them for archaeologists, and the degree of preservation is astonishing. The remains at Pompeii give one of the best pictures of what life in a Roman city may have been like. Here you can see one of the streets at Pompeii with the well-preserved houses. The stones you see in front are stepping stones to help people cross the streets when it was rainy or muddy. There are spaces between the stones so that carts or wagons can still pass. This is a plan of Pompeii. If you look carefully, you can see that there's an area with irregular streets and an area with a grid system. The irregular area is the oldest part of the city, and newer areas were added later on a grid system. The central meeting point of any Roman city is called the Forum, and we will start there. The Forum in Roman cities is similar to the Agora in Greek cities. There's usually a large open space, and it is surrounded by religious, economic, and government buildings. You can see on this plan of the Forum that there are two temples, the temple to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and also a temple to Apollo. You can also see an example of an imperial cult temple, the temple to the Emperor Vespasian. These other buildings near the temple to Vespasian functioned as marketplaces. This one, for example, was for the wool trade, and this other one for animals and meat. In the south are various governmental buildings, including a basilica. Although in later European history, a basilica refers to a church building, at this time it usually functions as a law court and a multi-purpose building for government administration and meetings. The large area in the center of the building could hold people watching a law court in session or for a large meeting. Later, the Christians adopted this type of building form for their churches, since they also needed a large enclosed space to hold people during the religious services. Around the Forum, you can see a lot of small one-room spaces, and these were spaces for small shops or even restaurants. On the left is a picture of one of the small restaurants, which we might call something like a wine bar, and you can see the amphoras containing wine stacked up in the background. On the right is a painting from Pompeii of a bakery, and you can see people purchasing loaves of bread. If a city could afford to build one, they would try to build an amphitheater for games and entertainment, and this is the one at Pompeii. Sometimes violence would occur among the fans gathered for the entertainment, and we know that a violent riot among fans from rival cities broke out one time at Pompeii, and it led to a ban on entertainment events for 10 years. Pompeii also had a small theater, which is a form of entertainment originally adopted from the Greeks. If we go back to the previous slide, you can see that an amphitheater allows for people to sit on both sides of a central space, similar to modern stadiums. While a theater has seats on one side with everyone facing one direction towards the stage, similar to many modern theaters and auditoriums. Most Roman cities also had several bath complexes, and here is pictured one of the ones from Pompeii. Baths both provided facilities for bathing, but they were also an important place to socialize, and often had spaces for other kinds of leisure activities such as exercise and athletics, libraries, and even restaurants. You can see that there are different rooms at this bath at Pompeii for both men and women, and also for hot and cold water. This bath at Pompeii is not especially large or elaborate, but emperors often sponsored the building of elaborate bath complexes, again as a way to gain popularity. The majority of space in any Roman city is dedicated to houses. Wealthy Romans also often had villas set in the countryside, and this slide gives you an idea of what the villa of a wealthy Roman would have looked like. The Getty Museum in Los Angeles was closely modeled on a villa found near Pompeii. This slide shows a cutaway view of an elite Roman house within the city of Pompeii. You can see that the house is arranged around a series of interior courtyards, some of which contain gardens. If one enters the house here, a person would first come into the atrium. An atrium is a central room with an open skylight in the roof. When it rains or snows, the rain can come through the opening and is captured in a basin in the floor called an impluvium. The water caught in the impluvium could also serve as a source of water for the household. In this particular case, you can see that the floor around the impluvium is decorated with mosaics, and the walls of the room are covered in wall painting. The atrium usually connects to other rooms arranged around it, and you could also walk through this atrium to a peristyle garden. A peristyle garden is something that the Romans adopted from the Hellenistic Greeks in the Eastern Mediterranean. You can see that it's an interior garden that's surrounded by columns, and there are spaces between the columns and the walls where you could sit, perhaps if it's raining or if it's too sunny, to be protected from the weather, but still be able to get some fresh air and light. Most Roman houses would also have a small shrine, sometimes containing statues of the lares, or protective spirits that help to take care of a house and a family. An elite Roman house would also contain at least one dining room called a triclinium. Here you can see reconstructions of Roman dining rooms with their couches for people to recline on while dining. This house at Pompeii has 2 dining rooms, including a summer dining room next to one of the gardens. When the weather was nice, people could dine outside. Although it may not look that nice now, imagine that these benches are covered with cloth and with pillows, such as in this painting from Pompeii. Both Pompeii and Herculaneum have very well preserved wall paintings within the houses. Many of the scenes are from Greek and Roman mythology. For example, here you can see Venus and the god Mars on the left, and the myth of Europa and the bull on the right. Many of the wall paintings are also painted in an illusionistic way, so that, for example, it seems that you are looking out a window, but in fact you are not. This other example looks as though there are columns and niches for statues, and that somebody is opening a small door at the lower left. But again, in reality, the wall is flat, and all of these are just illusions. We can see similar Roman houses in many parts of the empire. For example, these are photos of houses from Ephesus in Turkey. Again, you can see one of these interior courtyards surrounded by columns, and also a room painted with wall paintings and with a mosaic in the center of the room. I think you can get an idea from these examples that wealthy Romans spent a lot of money and other resources in building and decorating their houses as a way to impress visitors. Turning now to the 2nd century BC, this was the height of power for the Romans. There were a series of very strong and capable emperors who were known as the 5 good emperors, including Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. The empire reached its greatest extent under the rule of Trajan, who fought a series of wars with the Dacians in the area of modern Romania. The story of this war is shown on a monument called Trajan's Column, which you can still see if you visit Rome today. You can see that the story is told in pictures that spiral up the column to the top, and in fact it is difficult to see all the details if you're standing at the bottom. The column of Trajan was set within a new forum that Trajan commissioned, and which was completed after his death. You can see a temple to Trajan, who would have been deified by this point, and also the location of the column, which was located between 2 libraries. Some people would have been able to look more closely at the upper parts of the columns through windows in the libraries. You can also see a large basilica at the center of the complex, as well as an area for shops on the right side, which somewhat resembles a modern shopping mall. The emperor following the rule of Trajan is Hadrian. He was also somewhat unusual in that he spent a large portion of his rule traveling around to different parts of the empire and did not, in fact, spend much time in Rome. He is also remembered for his building projects, including Hadrian's Wall in England, built as a defensive wall, and also for a building called the Pantheon. It is also a monument that shows Roman engineering skills because of the large dome enclosing the building, and it provided a model for later domed buildings such as the Hagia Sophia. It has a large round opening in the roof, similar to the atrium opening in Roman houses. And if you visit the Pantheon when it's raining, it's interesting to watch the rain fall down within the building. When it's sunny, the whole acts as a spotlight which moves around the room as the sun moves across the sky. This building was originally a temple built to all the gods, the Pantheon, and now it is a church. After Hadrian, Antoninus Pius became emperor and ruled for 23 years. Despite the long period of rule, it was the most peaceful time of the empire with very few military campaigns or disturbances. He was succeeded by Marcus Aurelius, who is often called the last of the 5 good emperors. Unlike Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius had to spend much of his time on military campaigns, dealing with various threats from the Parthians in the Near East and Germanic tribes invading from the north. This map shows the location of the Parthians and also some of the Germanic tribes such as the Marcomanni and the Quadi. Military problems with the Germanic tribes and the Parthians continued into the 3rd century, which is a very difficult time for the Roman Empire and will be discussed in another lecture.